something. I flicked the cord.
Yeah.
Oh, go to that. Go back.
Good morning, everybody. We've had a bit of a failure there all of a sudden, so sorry about that. Can't always rely on technology nowadays. So anyway, we're on the
That got the heart started.
Oh dear, oh dear. So welcome everybody. I hope you're having a lovely day. I know it's a bit cooler today. Winter is here, as we can see. So yeah. Anyhow, show for today. What we're going to do today, there's a few things we're going to do today. So we will hopefully we'll get through everything, and I'm just checking to see that everything is working on our screen so that we've got all up and running after that failure. Anyway, it all looks good. So if we're having a problem, please let me know, and we'll see if we can fix it. And good evening to John Parra. So I hope you're there. Hope you're having fun over there. But anyway, on with the show. So, where were we up to? Last week, we put together and sanded up the board. We glued everything together, and we're going to do a little bit of work on that today. But in the meantime, we're at a point where we can actually put a finish on the framework. The framework's been all done, it's all sanded. What we have to do today is start looking at how we're going to connect it to the cabinet. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some of these little buttons. Just change cameras. Now the little buttons work like this. What I did was I used my domino cutter to cut a little rebate in the side of where it's going to be, where the cabinet's going to be mounted. And the normal process for this that we've done in the past, or you would find in the past, would be a rebate would be cut all the way along here, and then the buttons would be made and fitted wherever you need to. Now, I don't need a lot of buttons because this thing's going to sit stably. So the buttons basically fit in like this, and then a screw comes up from underneath and screws that to the bottom of the cabinet. So making the buttons, you don't need very big ones, but what you do need is you need to make sure that the buttons are made this way. Let's get myself a pencil here and I'll show you what the story is. Now the buttons are made like this. The grain on the button needs to run along the button this way because that makes the button strong. This technique is exceptionally good for allowing movement of the parts so that things don't get jammed together, because I'm not going to use any glue on it, I'm just going to fit it together. But I need to cut a rebate in the end of that. Now most pieces of timber that we find, I get a piece of timber, often a piece of timber is generally not wide enough to get very many buttons. You can see this one here is only 100mm, particularly when we're in box making mode. The other thing that you have to find is you have to find a piece of timber that's the right thickness. So what I've got, I'm using coachwood. Now coachwood's quite strong and the strength is along the grain. If I cut the rebate along the edge like that, my grain is running this way. So when we put pressure on it, there's a likelihood that we'll snap it along the grain. Don't want to do that. What we want is we want it nice and strong, so the grain should be this way. So we're going to cut the end of it. Now, when you make this piece of timber, this is what you should do. what we want is we want the surface on the top here to be a tiny little bit below that surface there, so that when you put the screw in there, it pushes up and allows a little bit of pressure. So what we need is this piece of timber here to be the same thickness as the distance from the bottom of the where I put my domino cut to the top edge, so that my thickness will be that from the bottom edge up to the top edge. Alright, and what I need to do is I need to cut out that top section so that that sits like that. Okay, so when I push it in there, it's either flush on the top. If it's too flush on the top, we just take a little bit more off the bottom of that. Okay, and that will actually give a bit of pressure, and then when we fit that on there, we put the screw through here. Okay, so that's what we're going to do with that's how the buttons work. Now, you might think, gee, they're tiny buttons. Well, I've got 6 of them, so that's going to be quite okay. Often when you look at a piece of furniture, you'll find that the buttons are actually quite big and they're all rounded over and they're smoothed up and all that. I haven't done that to these ones, but I will do them before I actually attach everything. I'll round over the edges and make them a little bit smooth and just sort of make them a little bit nicer than they are. They're not seen, they are a functional thing. They do have a reason to be reasonably sharp around the edges, but you can make them as pretty as you like. So the first thing we have to do is we have to cut the rebate into our piece of timber here. Now I've only got 4 of them at the moment, and I need to cut some more. And it's a good idea to get yourself a wide piece of timber that you can use. And I use my tenon cutter. For those of you who have only just seen this the first time, that's our tenon cutter that we have in our, I'm going to use this as my judge, the tenon cutter that we have in our cutter kits. So all I'm going to do is just adjust this to there. Because I've already cut some, I've already got all the measurements worked out. Check see if that's just a tiny bit too high.
It is, yeah, it's got to.
Just got to bring it down a little bit.
So that sits over the cutter.
Yeah. Just wanted to scrape it so that we've got exactly the right measurement. A bit of a fiddle, but once we get it right. I could use the lark tool.
Oh, why not?
But I don't need to, I've got this one. If I was using the lark tool, I'd do it this way.
Where's your blue one?
Oh, I've got a fancy blue one, haven't I?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the new model. I noticed, Graham, you're looking for another one, so
This is the one.
this is the one that you'll get. So all I've done is set that to that. There's my hold it still, and then I can sit it like so. Let's check that. Got that too low. There's a bit of a fiddle, but we'll get it right.
Because you want it to just a little bit of gentle force to get it into the hole, don't you? Into the
If Pam was saying that you need a little bit of
resistance
in there, so you can see that's quite a little bit snug, which is quite nice.
Just do that again.
So it's just a little bit. You can see I'm just pulling it out, and it's just a little bit of resistance in there. It's not wobbling around. We don't want it to wobble around. We want it to hold in tight so that it's nice and flush like that. Okay. Now the other distance we need is the distance from there to there. Now that distance is the depth of my trench. So, lark tool in the bottom of the trench, lock it in, and it's telling me that it's 12 millimeters deep. I've come back another little bit so that it's this space at the back edge of it. Now we'll set the fence up. Use a different size, smaller one. Okay, so that was the depth of the hole. I don't want it to go that full depth, so if I just back it off a little bit, that'll give me a little bit of room at the back end or in the bottom of the hole for movement. A little bit of space there doesn't hurt. Okay, so now it's just a matter of cutting across there. Now remember our little push box. This is the wider one, by the way, so it's just a matter of making sure that it's across there, nicely protected against everything, so quite safe. So it's just a matter of now ears on. So ears on, everybody. And so there's my little rebate. All I need to do now to match that up is work out how long I want the buttons. Now the length of the button is really irrelevant. It doesn't matter how big it is, how long it is. It depends on the work that you're doing. So I'm just going to gauge off this one here that I've already got. About there somewhere, and I'll go over to the drop saw and I'll drop that off. Again, just making sure the ears on, everybody. And then that's what we have. Now, I'm going to remove all this stuff because we don't need any of this anymore. I will need that. If you wish to test, just use the corner and put it in the hole, see if it fits in the hole, which does quite nicely, and it's flush on the top. I might actually take that out of there because I've got to put a different router bit in later. Now when I cut these off, I could go over to the drop saw and do it, but I've already got another one that I made. I'm going to keep that one for after. I'm just going to do these by hand. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get a measurement. So when I take my measurement, you'll notice that the curve on the hole is actually, on the rebate, is actually round. That's not going to be, that's going to interfere, so we do the flat section. So I've got 15 millimeters in width, which is adequate. I think that's what I did these ones at, 15 mil. Actually, these ones I've got at 17 mil, a little bit wider, so I might do them all at 17 mil. So I need one little square. Now, Pammy said she thought you might be interested in what's in behind this cupboard door. Now, some of you have seen it already, but some of you haven't. Generally, what I do, I keep in this cupboard here is all my quality tools that I don't want sitting out and getting rusty and all that sort of stuff. So I've got my cold plinth and squares sitting on the bench here. I've got my Chris Vesper squares and things. I've got my I've just got sets of drill bits, and this is lovely mallet that Pammy wanted me to use last week. So various bits and pieces. I've also got the squares that we use up there, a couple of spanners, some Japanese tools, Japanese saws, and on here I've got my various saws. Now we're going to talk about those in a second, but generally I've only got my marking out, measuring, and some small cutting tools in here, and some drilling bits and pieces. I haven't cluttered it up with lots of bits and pieces. I tend to find that it's easier to have them on the wall around you rather than stuffed in a cupboard like this. I could probably rearrange the cupboard a bit better. Maybe time will tell. It's a bit of time that needed. So basically that's all that's in that cupboard for those of you who haven't seen that before. So here we go. Now, the saw that I'm going to use. Now, generally when you go and when you buy a saw, I buy my saws to suit the purpose that I need. So if I'm going to crosscut, I buy a crosscut, a dedicated crosscut saw. If I'm doing any ripping at all, I use a dedicated ripping saw. Now most saws nowadays, if you go to a hardware store and buy a saw, they're a combination of both. Now somebody said to me once, what's the difference between a crosscut saw and a ripping saw? A crosscut saw, when you look at the teeth on a crosscut saw, you'll see that they are actually they'll have their set, which is splayed open, and the teeth on a crosscut saw are actually angled back in towards the centre.
So let's see.
You can't see that on these saws. It's the saw is too small.
Too fine, is it?
This is my crosscut saw, and it's very, very small. You can't actually see the teeth set on it. But when you have a look at it, you'll see this one here's got 16 teeth per inch. So there's 16 teeth between every inch. So a very fine saw. This is the one I use for dovetailing if I'm doing my dovetails by hand. So the teeth on it, I could probably draw you a picture which would be better, I think. Not that. Try this. Let me draw you a picture. So if this is your blade, and your teeth are out here, one splayed out that way and one splayed out that way, and the distance from there to the point of that is called your set. A crosscut saw has the tip of the blade is actually pointing, has an angle on it, and that angle is designed to slice through your timber, right? Where on a ripping saw, it's not the case. You have your teeth out here, they are flat, right, on the top. so when you look at your set, you've got flat teeth on them. Whereas with a crosscut saw, it's more of a slicing action. Okay, so this is more of a chisel, and this one here is more of a slicing action.
Is there a particular action that, in the way that you're cutting with each of these saws, is there a particular action you use, like cutting in one direction only?
Normally with these particular saws, as opposed to Japanese saws have got these pointing backwards, so you're pulling the saw. On this particular saw, and most saws that you get, pushing action is the action that makes it work. So I hope that explains a little bit about saws. So I have been asked about them in the past, and I thought it might be an interesting thing to say. So depending on what you use them for, I use it mostly because I'm using fine work. I have the teeth on my saws are very, very fine. You can get them a lot coarser than that for different actions. Generally hand saws have got big teeth on them, or if you're using logs, you've got things that are teeth that are 2 inches long. These ones here, very fine, because we're doing a lot of fine work with dovetails. Right, now I don't want my cross cut saw. If I was cross cut, I'd be cutting across this way, and my ripping is along the grain. And I always keep it covered, always protect it. Let's measure up some of these. If I put that pencil, it's always the way. I'll measure this one here and see what I've got. Okay, up against I put the saw up against the end of my board to stop. And there we have it. Just do another one. So I need 6 of them. I've got 4 made already. You might find it easier cutting these on the drop saw. Sometimes I do these just to keep my hand in and give me some sort of reason why I bought these tools to start with. Let's measure that one there. I think I've measured this one wrong.
Cole, we've got a new international viewer. It's Chris Sullivan from Otago in New Zealand.
Oh,
welcome, Chris.
Welcome, Chris. Hope you enjoy the show. And there we have those two. Chris, we're here every Sunday, so if you want to pop in on Sundays, you're more than welcome. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and we will you will have access to our library of stuff. Now what I've done there is I've just marked across the middle. I'm going to drill a hole in them. Lots of these things take a little bit of time, so it's a matter of having some patience. So what I want to do with these, the back edge of it is countersunk for the screw. Now the size of the screw that I'm going to use is that one there, brass screw. So I'm going to drill a hole that's big enough so that that will fit in there to start with, and then I'll drill a little pilot hole into the bottom of the cabinet when I screw that into the cabinet. So over to the drill press. Now I haven't tidied these up at all. I haven't done any odd work to them. Now all I'm going to do at the start is just to drill the hole through it, and then I'll turn it over and do the countersink from the other side. Now if they're a little bit off centre, it really doesn't matter. It's only your pride that's going to be dented because you didn't get it in the middle.
And that cross marking is giving you a true reference point, top and bottom, isn't it?
Yes. The reason I do it that way is because often what you'll find that when you drill straight through, particularly when you've got nothing underneath your piece of timber, you get a little bit of blowout on the back of it. Now we're going to countersink that, so it's just a matter of turning it over. And my countersink bit is already there. Tidy it up just by now it's nice and clean on that side, and it's nice and clean on that side. My second one. And it just cleans up that little bit of blowout that we got. Gives me that. Now it's just a matter of testing. So we come over to our that's the one we just made, and it fits pretty much spot on. It's a little bit high, but I can deal with that. It's just a matter of taking it off. And that's the one I have for that side. That's the one for that side. And that's the one for that side. So basically all of my little buttons are all there, and once we screw that onto the cabinet, you're not going to see the buttons, and they're not going to interfere with the look that we're trying to achieve, and it'll be quite strong. So our next task is to start doing things like getting to the stage where we're finishing and putting the finishes on. And I'm not going to take the top off these two here that I've just made just yet. I'll do that once I start fitting things. So let's take these out of here,
So
and
Cole,
then we'll work on fitting.
Michael Peel asked, what do you sand to? You know, how finely do you sand the cabinet?
Okay, this, Michael, when we're talking about finishing, I was brought up in a workshop where we were painting cars and motorbikes and the like. And whenever we finished a car, we prepared it in such a way that we had a nice smooth finish. Now that's how we work on a motor vehicle. But when we're working on timber, you've got to remember that timber is not like metal, and it's porous. The lessons that I learned over those years, I employ in my woodwork as well. And as I've gone through my woodworking career, people have gone, you don't need to sand that much. And when I talk to people who use finishing, you don't need to sand that much. The finish will fill everything and so on. My personal experience is that if you don't prepare things properly, you're not going to get a good result. And so I keep using the same techniques that I used when I was painting motor vehicles on my woodwork. And I'm getting exceptionally good results because I go back to very fine grades of sandpaper. So I start with a coarse sandpaper to get everything roughed down, so get rid of all your pencil marks, your scratches, your dents, anything that's happening to the piece of timber, and work my way through grades of sandpaper. Now I worked my way through a number of grades of sandpaper, and as you can see here, I've got various sizes of sandpaper, and I have lots of it all around the place. The finest I go with cabinetry is generally 800 grit. So, and it's a wet and dry sandpaper. With cabinetry, with boxes, I'll go to 1200 because they're a smaller item and so on. But you work your way through the grades. Now, I've got 240. At the moment, what I have here is I've got 240 grit, 360 grit, 400 and 800, and that's all I'm going to use on this cabinet here, because when I work with this I'm going to actually use some pumice powder and give it a scrub once I've put a finish on and raised the grain. So work to your finest grades that you have. If you stop at 180 or 240, you're always going to have scratch marks. You remember the numbers on the back of the sandpaper designate the number of particles per square centimetre on your piece of sandpaper. So you've got 800 there, so if we turn that over, 1 square centimetre, there's 800 particles in there. So imagine trying to get 800 particles into 1 square centimetre. They've got to be pretty small, so it's very, very fine. So that's how you work the numbers on your sandpaper. The higher the number, the finer the grade. The lower the number, the coarser the sandpaper. Now, if you're using 40 grit, of course you're going to have big chunky bits of particles on your sandpaper, and it's going to give you big scratches on your work. So you need to work through your grades and don't miss any. Work through your grades from coarse to very, very fine, and you will always come up with a spectacular job, and people will admire the work. Because remember, what happens when you present something to somebody? The first thing they go is they'll pick it up and they'll go, oh gee, that's smooth. And it's because you finished it properly. And that prompts them to go look at the quality of your work. So the first thing is they see is how well you finished the thing. And guarantee every single time that you miss a bit and leave a scratch mark, somebody's going to go, oh, you missed a bit. And then where are you? So, you know, you've got to go back to the square one and start sanding again and then refinishing. So what I've done with this is I've sanded this to 800 and it is very smooth. It's almost got a sheen on it. I could go finer, but I'm only going to go to 800 with this because it's a piece of furniture that's going to get a good scrubbing anyway. So let's go through that and show you that. I hope that covers your question there, Graham.
And that was Michael.
Was it Mike, Graham? Sorry, Michael.
Yeah.
God, jeez.
That's okay.
Waffling on.
I think it's helpful to go through these things and refresh occasionally.
Yeah. So what I'm doing, I'm just going to put a piece of scrap on there. I don't want to get my bench all grubby. Now my first task, pair of gloves. Now the finish I'm using, I'm told is organic, which means that it's not going to poison me, but I still like to put a pair of gloves on, cover up my hands. Now Dave Stanton said to me once, don't blow in the glove. when you're trying to put it on, because all of a sudden you've got all that moisture. But on a cold day, guess what? I've got way back later. Now, finish I'm using. I'm going to put some Chinese wood oil on it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a coat of finish on it, and then I'm going to set it aside. When I come back to it, I'm going to use some pumice powder mixed with Chinese wood oil, and I'm going to give it a scrub. Now the pumice, what we'll do is that will give you a filling of the grain. Okay, so you're going to do that. It also, when you put your first coat on, it's going to raise the grain, and it will also take off all the little nibs and things like that from where the grain's been raised. So I'll show you that process when we get to it. Right now, I'm just going to put a coat of finish on here. So for those of you who like watching paint dry, carry on watching. For those of you who don't like watching paint dry,
Go make a cup of tea.
Go make a cup of tea and come back and I'll have it all finished. Okay, so all I've done is put it in a thing, and you're going to see a real change in the colour. So I'm going to start on the inside and watch how this looks.
Pretty pretty.
And people say, I don't want it to go dark. Well, it was dark when they cut it down. This is the colour of the timber when it was alive, before it was seasoned. So if you want light timber, you need to get a white timber. And you'll find that all the lovely grain colours will come out. So just do each part as an individual bit.
Cole, just to remind everybody about the Constantia offer.
Oh, Constantia. Oh, actually I should show you that because it's a little, well, put it this way. If you buy $50 worth of product from Constantia, and they've got this special running, I believe till the end of to the beginning of next year, I think it is.
Yeah, to the end of this year, I think.
End of this year.
Yeah.
If you buy $50 more, $50 of sorry, I'll start again. If you buy $50 worth of product, and when you put your order in, you put in Coles Special, so COLSPECIAL, if you write that code on your order, you'll get a discount. I can't remember what the discount is, can you? 10%?
Yeah, I think so.
10% discount. You'll also get a free sample of one of the other products that you haven't ordered.
Unfortunately, this is only of real value to the Australian customers.
Yes, unfortunately.
Overseas are going to get hammered with posts, so it's really not of any value to you. And there's probably something very like this in America or New Zealand or anywhere else. It just so happens this is an excellent Australian-made product.
Made in Adelaide. And Summer will welcome your phone call. So if you get onto the website, there's a link. If you scroll down, there's a link below. And Summer is a lovely person. She's really clever when it comes to this finish. And she'll look after you. As you can see, I'm putting this on quite thick. I just want it, basically because I want it to soak in. Cedar is very porous and it will tend to sort of drink a lot of this stuff. You can see it's almost dried up in a couple of places, and that's because it's soaking in. You don't have to use a brush to put it on, you can use a cloth if you wish. I just find brushing it on it gives me the results I want because I'm getting plenty of finish on it. those of you who went and made a cup of tea, how are you doing with a cup of tea? Did you get a biscuit with it?
And John O'Connell wants to know, Cole, do you ever use a fine steel wool when you're finishing, you know, doing the wet?
John, I hear every time I see somebody doing a wet and dry or finishing with steel wool, one of the problems that I've encountered in the past with using steel wool is that the steel wool tends to sort of degrade as you use it, and what it does on soft timber like this, and this is my experience only, I don't know if anybody else has had this this problem, the fibres of the steel wool become embedded in the finish, or embedded into the timber surface, and eventually they rust because it's not stainless steel, it's just mild steel, and when they rust they actually create issues with the finish. Now, as I said, that's my experience with it. So I used it many years ago, and now I don't bother. I prefer to wet and dry with sandpaper. So if I'm going to wet and dry or give a piece of work a scrub after I've put a finish on it, I'll generally use 2000 grit sandpaper. I'll wet sand it, and I use that technique all of the time. I wet sand, and
actually the result's very good.
The
very high quality.
The results come up quite nice. I spend a lot of time on my finishing because, like I say, it's the first thing everybody sees when they pick a piece of work up of yours, and that's the one that you want them to admire. So.
And the pumice is the end part of the process too, isn't it?
Well, what the pumice will do is give you is good grain filling, and it's also scrubbing as well. It eventually gets all white off and all white, and then we'll put another couple of coats on afterwards. You can see where this is drying very quickly. Well, it's not actually drying; it's soaking in. And I don't want that to happen just yet. It's not going to stay glossy. I'm not a big fan of gloss. That
is just an indication of how lovely that cabinet's going to be. It's just beautiful.
You can see the colour in that timber now is starting to stand out.
I think John Paris says it pops, and he's right. It does.
So take your time with your finishing, because, like I say, it's the first thing everybody sees when they pick up your work, and you want it always to look nice. And quite frankly, is everybody will doesn't, you know, I don't know anybody that doesn't like a pat in the back.
True.
Okay, so there we have the first coat. So I'm just going to set that aside. What I want to do is just set that aside for a little bit and just let it soak in, and then we'll come back to it. I'll wipe off the excess, and I'll come back to it and give it a scrub with the pumice. When we use the pumice, I'm going to use the little pads that I've made up. So I've just made these up with bits of rag and a cable tie. And we'll make that. So I'm just going to shift this out of the way, and then we'll get on to something else that I said we were going to do this week, but I've got plenty of time to do it, so we'll have a little chat about that. We may not get back to this, but let's hope we do. I'll just shift this aside. Okay. So that's come up quite nice. I'm really pleased with that. It's going to look really nice, and you can see the colour, how it stands out, and you can actually see when you look at the end grain of the dovetails, you can see the dovetails stand out now. They didn't stand out so much before, but they do now, and that's what we were trying to achieve with our job, is to show where we've used all the dovetails. Now, this one. So what we did here is we joined all this together last week and put the butterflies in, and since then I've sanded the whole thing, so it's got quite a nice finish on it. That's the back of the cabinet. I'm not too concerned about the cabinet. Now I've got some markings on there, and that's so that I can centre it on the cabinet top, and they'll come off before I actually put it together. It'll also get a coat of finish before we put it together. Now you'll notice over on the far side here, there's a fault in the timber. I didn't want to throw that piece of timber away because I love the grain in it for a start, but I didn't want the faults to show up on the job. Now, if you're keen on keeping these sorts of things and showing them visibly, what you'll probably need is to fill that with some sort of resin so that it's got a flat surface. But it doesn't show up on this side, so that's quite good for what I wanted to do. Now, during the discussion, Pam and I came up with some ideas on what the edge was going to look like on our cabinet. And that is something that everybody goes, oh, what'll I do? You know, like there's always a problem with it. So what I did was I took a couple of pieces of timber and I made a couple of test joints. So that was one that we did, that I did. All I've done is rounded over the top edge and the bottom edge. So I've done that, and I did it on the whole piece. So I went all the way around the piece to do it, and it looks quite nice. So imagine that being on the, you know, on our job. That was just one idea. Now, if you come up with one idea and you go along with it, it's fine, not a problem. But we didn't want that one. So what I did is I came up with another idea, and this one, I'll just hold it up like that. I think you can see that I've taken quite a big chamfer off the edge, and I've rounded over the top edge just a tiny little bit, right? And so when you hold that on there, you can see what it's going to look like. Now I could probably take that chamfer a little bit higher so that I could bring it up, you know, a little bit higher up on the edge, and just have a small thin edge there, or a square one. I could do that too, so I could have done that with part of it, but that didn't quite suit either. So what we did is we went to just a straight little chamfer. So there's just a chamfer there and a chamfer there, and that's going to be what we're going to do with our job. So you can see I've come all the way around and just on a corner, and it looks quite nice just having a chamfer on this piece. So that's what we'll do now, and I'll just cut that up. So the round bit that I'm using for this one is our 45-degree chamfer bit. Now, because I've already cut this and we've got it to a stage where we like it, I can actually set the height of the router bit to the existing cut. So, and as you can see, it's not very much. So I'm going to do a little test. So I'm just going to run along here and just cut. I'll have to cut one of these off. Oh, I can't do that. I might find another piece of scrap. There's a piece. Okay, so I'll just do a little test on this, and let's see if I've got it right. I can always adjust it. Okay, ears on everybody. Pretty much spot on. I think you can see that. And that's all we need. Just take the sharp edge off and it'll look quite nice. So I'm going to do both sides of this. That might give me 5 minutes back onto the other job. So ears on everybody. Do the bottom first. Check everything's on. So ears on. For those people who like using planes, I probably could have done that with my plane quite easily, because we're cutting along the grain. It's not as if we're cutting across it or anything like that. You're going to get any tear out, but you're cutting along the grain. So that's what the edge of the cupboard is going to, the end of the top is going to look like once it's attached. So it looks quite nice. I might just take the little sharp edge off the corner. We'll do that later, but I won't do it right now. But we want to go back to our top. We've got 5 minutes left, so just want to give you a demonstration. So now basically that's ready to fit onto our cabinet.
I'm really pleased with that edging.
It is a nice edge, isn't it? It's
yeah.
Just, and it doesn't take a whole lot to sand it up either. So
we wanted to maintain a nice sort of Swedish square modern look, but it's right to soften some edges just to take that really quite structured look off the cabinet.
That's a very good explanation, Danny. I couldn't have done it better myself. Artistic flair, they call it sometimes.
A good collaboration.
Yep. Okay. Here's the fun bit. Where's my glove? You can see when you look at this now, just focus in on this bit here, Penny. See on the top of there, you can see how it's gone flat. What it's done is soaked up all the material. There's a little bit on the edge here that hasn't soaked in, but the rest of it has. Now, if I left that sit overnight, it would even soak it in a little bit more. I just don't have time on the show today, so we're going to go ahead with our next task. Now, inside, none of this is going to be seen on the inside here, so I'm not going to be too fussy about that. I'm just going to make sure that I've got a good coat to finish on it. And these gloves, let's try a new one. I was using a second-hand one. And I didn't want to blow in it because Dave Stanton said I shouldn't, because it'll get all fluffy inside, all moist, and you can't get them on. It's cold today, so that would probably apply. Okay. Now you can see on top of here, you can see the little dry patches here and here and here. Now they are because the finish is soaked in. It's not going to be that shiny, by the way. So now it's just a piece of cloth, and I'm just going to wipe the excess off.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of just wipe it off, just make sure you got as much as you can off it. It's going to get wet again anyway, so but you just want to wipe the excess off. That'll help take some of the furry bits off it. Okay. Gosh, that looks nice. It's beautifully smooth. Because I've worked down to 800 grit sandpaper, it's beautifully smooth. Now, just have a little sip here. The odour of this is really quite a nice smelling finish as well. It doesn't permeate the whole area as much as some of the other finishes that I have used in the past. Now what I have here, I've got some oil mixed up with a couple of spoonfuls of the pumice powder. So it's all mixed up together, and it's almost like, I suppose if you rub toothpaste between your fingers, that's what you're feeling, something like that. And so what I'll do is I'll paint someone like that. The oil will automatically soak in. God, look how good those dovetails look. And then my little pad. Let's shift things out of the way so I don't knock them over. Now my little pad, this is just cloth wrapped up in another piece of cloth held together with a cable tie. Now they don't last very long because this the pumice powder is quite, what would you call it? Abrasive, yep, I suppose that would be a good word. And what it's doing, it'll fill the grain. You can see little circles. Along the grain, bigger area, with smaller circles, and I'll do that all over. Okay, so what I've done is I've used up the bulk of the material that I put on there. Now, one of the things that I've found that works exceptionally well once you've got it to that stage, it's still got pumice on it, it's still abrasive. I'm using my little Merker tool with a pad that's put out by a company called Rupees, R-U-P-E-E-S. And this little pad is like a little piece of carpet. It's just a woolly bit of carpet. So that's what I'm going to use. And I'm just going to give that a brush. If you do it while it's wet, it tends to spray it all over the place, so it's not quite wet. And it just sort of takes away all of that energy you need if you're doing it by hand. Just make it easy. Clean piece of cloth.
Now that's got a beautiful sheen to it.
And look at that. beautifully flat, and if you look at the dovetails, you can see how crisp and clean they look. They just look beautiful, and to get a finish like that, you actually need to make some effort in getting the piece of timber flat to start with. So what I'll do with that, I'm only going to do the outside edges because that's all that's going to be seen, and I'll do that to all the outside edges. We've run out of time at the moment, but the last thing that I'll do is I will put on another coat of the Constantia once I've wiped that clean. There's one brush.
On the board.
And I'll just put one more coat on there. Work on the grain, and I'll just let that sit for about 3 or 4 hours, wipe off any excess and let it settle for a few days before I actually look at putting any sort of wax on it. Okay, so that will come up quite nice, and you can see the sheen on it just from that, and that's not a heavy coat of oil. So if I was doing the top, it'll be a little bit heavier than that to more to settle in and soak in, but this is going to sit vertically. So it's a technique that I use to get things finished. So hopefully you got something out of that. Now don't forget, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. Catch us every Sunday when you've got nothing to do. And we'll have something for you. Now next week we're going to start looking at fitting things, and I'm also going to start looking at the drawers. At the moment I'm waiting for material for the drawer frames. We're not doing them in cedar, we're going to use a different material, but we're going to have a cedar front on it. We'll start discussing how to do that, and we'll attach the top and the bottom of the cabinet. So hopefully you got something out of today, and have a good weekend. So enjoy, and I'll catch you all later.